You're listening to the Nash Rocket Media Experiment. Planning a visit to Music City? Be sure to check out the Daily Nash with Nash Rocket.
Why, thank you, announcer Babe. Now watch this segue. Coming up today in Nashville, the Babe Fest 2019, all weekend long at Disc and Cider. You can find out more information about that. You have to be 21. You can't sneak in there with cider. Wink, wink. If you know what I mean, it's going to be fun. It's about empowering business women and cider. Right? Okay. I'd like to be a fly on the wall in that event. DiscInsider.com is where you can get all the info there. Also today from 11 a.m. to 7 p.m., it is the Food Truck Feast over in East Nasty. That's right. And look, if you're planning on a visit to Nashville and you see one or more, and particularly a cluster of food trucks, you need to stop what you're doing and get over there and do some taste testing because they are fabulous here. And so what they're doing today is having a food truck feast. I'm just going to let your imagination take that over right there. It's fabulous. It's over in East Nasty. At the Grand Ole Opry, the headliner tonight is Old Crow Medicine Show. And if you like the grape, if you're a person of the grape, and I don't know why I'm doing the accent. Music in the Vines from 4 to 8 p.m. this afternoon at Arrington Vineyards. That's about 35 miles outside of the city, so you need to plan accordingly if you have other plans later in the evening, because it takes a bit of time to get out there and get back. But man, Arrington Vineyards is awesome. And the Sweet Corn Fun Festival is going on today till 5 o'clock this afternoon out in Eagleville, Tennessee. Okay. And the Saturday pool party every Saturday at the Hotel Preston. Nothing's going on at Bridgestone tonight. Ascend Amphitheater is also dark, but listen to this. Brian Ferry is at the Ryman tonight. One of my favorite songs ever, Slave to Love. Slave to Love. Oh, man, remember that song? A huge hit from the movie 9.5 Weeks. I mean, for me, that would be, just to see that song live by Brian Ferry, would be worth the price of admission right there. I'm telling you. Tickets are available at Ryman.com. And those are some of the highlights around this fun town. We close out Elvis week with Larry Raspberry and my interview with him right on the flip side here. Thank you for listening to the Daily Nash. Well, I just got to touch base with probably the second most famous name in Memphis music, Larry Raspberry. Ladies and gentlemen, let's give Larry some love.
The second most famous name on my block.
Let's get to it. I know you got just a tiny sketch of time. Let me just ask you, when did Elvis first come into your consciousness?
I pretty graphically remember I was 8 years old, I believe. That would have been 1955. And, you know, we that were born and reared in Memphis watched the rise of the Rockabilly Kings. And Elvis was a forerunner, or was the head guy of all those. Carl Perkins, Jerry Lee Lewis particularly, and Elvis were the Rockabilly Kings in my life. So I was introduced to them, first of all, on the radio. I heard their records locally. But I had a cousin that was 7 years older than me, and she was a teenage girl in Memphis in 1955. And she had box camera black and white photos of Elvis that she had taken around town while he was becoming famous. So that was my first orientation to the King.
Did he have any influence on you musically?
He had a great deal of influence on me as someone who listened to a guy that he aspired to sound like and be like. I never met Elvis. I was in the audience at Elvis shows, but I never had the privilege of having an introduction or being in an interchange with him conversationally. But yes, he had a huge influence, and I returned to those influences there were things on those early records that will not be duplicated as far as innovations go. Mm-hmm. And I go back and borrow from them frequently even now.
Where were you? Do you remember when he passed away? Do you remember hearing about it? Where were you? What were you doing?
I remember vividly because my wife, Carol, Missy Carroll, had taken a job for the city at the time, and I was putting together a new road band of high steppers that were rehearsing at my house every day of the week before we went on tour that fall in September. And the phone rang on one of our breaks, and Carol said, the Civil Defense helicopter has just been dispatched to Elvis's house for medical purposes. And we didn't know why, but she was concerned, as we all were. And then, of course, we learned later why that was the case. So I was at home in a little street called Manhattan Avenue in Memphis, Tennessee, rehearsing with the High Steppers for a road tour when we lost Elvis.
He never intended to be what Elvis ended up becoming. My understanding is that he wanted to make a record for his mama, and that it cost $4 to do it, and that $4 changed the world. You got any thoughts or insights on that?
Well, I'm not expert on that history, and did not. I had a more of a musical interest than I did in archival history. But I'm told that was the song "Old Shep" or was it "My Happiness" that he came in and recorded it, and the young lady that was running the front of the studio was the first to hear that special something in Elvis's delivery, and she liked his personal style and his unassuming manner. So that I'm sort of the same. I'm sort of oriented to that the same way that we all are. We've read about it, and it's part of history.
Can you give me some insights on what Elvis did? We talked about him changing the world with that $4 investment. How do you view what he did to the world? Has anybody else other than Jesus been that impactful?
Well, you'd have Beatle fans that would argue as well, and the Beatles might argue in favor of Elvis.
Right, right.
I don't know. For me, he was a template of what you could be. I've always thought that because we grew up in the shadow of those rockabilly kings, common folk that had a hunger and had a creative innovation that was heretofore unheard, and it was primitive, but they non-apologetically offered it as what they had and who they were, and it resonated with a bunch of us who were just like them or a lot like them. It made us feel like we could make it because they made it. And that's a little grandiose on my part because I certainly am not Elvis, but just seeing him and aspiring to him, humble beginnings, doing their best, and their best are rewarded by people who loved them and liked them because they were so much like their audience.
And that's multiplied. That's multiplied all over the world. You know, that's not
exactly.
Just America. Yeah.
And up until then, I'll tell you the other thing we have to give Elvis credit for is that Elvis embraced bluegrass, but he also embraced the blues, and he embraced the electric after World War II blues that were not very popular with white audiences at the time, nor were the white audiences very familiar with him to know whether they liked him or not. Mm. And Elvis brought that to those kids. Those kids doing the bop might not have known they were dancing to an Arthur Big Boy cut-up song, but they sure found themselves singing it afterwards.
What is up with Larry Raspberry and the High Steppers? I see them bouncing around online every now and then. I see that you're still performing. Bless your heart. You got more energy than the rest of us. What's the latest with the High Steppers?
The High Steppers are still alive and kicking and trying to kick as high as always. Admittedly, we're not a day in and day out road band. And also, I found that there's a new awareness for the anniversary of the Gentry's hit, Keep On Dancin'. There are a lot of boomer rockers, baby boomers that still rock, finally remember their orientation to the garage band concept in the form of the Gentry's and Me and the Boys singing Keep On Dancin'. So there's actually a Gentry's 2019 that goes and plays around the country. And then I spent some time in Nashville, your fair city, trying to espouse some of the ambitions I had as a songwriter. I was lucky enough to do the Bluebird with Keith Sykes and Dickie Lee and Buzz Cason and play around town there and enjoy Nashville immensely. So I'm on the left coast today as we speak, visiting relatives that haven't been visit with me. We're still out there. We go where we're welcome, and that website is LarryRaspberry.com.
Thank you for listening to the Daily Nash with Nash Rocket. Please subscribe and ring the bell so you'll be notified when there's new content.
So baby, don't touch me with the dark body